Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Whisky Me live tasting for Burns Night 2024 on the 25th of January. I'm Tristan, co-founder of Whisky Me, and this is Tom, co-founder of Whisky Me.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, well, I've got four whiskies in front of me, and I'm going to make a cocktail, so it could be worse.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to seeing your cocktail making skills at the end of this by the time we got through 3 or 4 different drams.
Well, I think you've seen them before, and as I'm sure you can attest, they've got gradually worse over the last decade or two. But we'll do our best.
Yeah, indeed. Well, you know what? You used to be really good at it, and when you were good at it, you normally had a few drinks inside you. So I don't have any reason to doubt that you can't execute tonight.
That's true. Yeah, very true. We'll see.
Cool. So this is it's a one-off tasting, or at least a once annually tasting for Burns Night, and we thought this year we would do something special and release a special trio of whiskies in pouches in a tasting pack that are the result of collaborations that we've done with 2 different independent bottlers over the last 6 months. So Carn and James Eadie, 2 highly prestigious bottlers of single malt Scotch whiskey that we've partnered with. We've acquired some casks off them, and then we've sort of co-branded, co-bottled whiskies with them. So if you are one of our normal members, you will, of course, probably be familiar with these whiskies. You will have tasted them in the last 6 months because we would have sent them out as part of our normal subscription. But if you're new to this, as most of the people on this tasting probably are, then these whiskies will be new to you because, quite simply, you will not have tasted them unless you are a member of Whisky Me or you've bought whiskey from us. So just to get things, it's a bit of housekeeping in the right order. This is going to take 45 minutes to an hour in total. We're going to try and allow some time for some questions and all that sort of stuff, but feel free to fire questions as long as you go or as we go. We're going to taste in this following order. We're going to start with Glenlossie. Then we're going to move on to the Tiernick, and then we're going to finish on the Benrinnes. And that specific order, the rationale behind it will become clear as we go along, as you taste the whiskies and try them. They're all fantastic. I think we're going to find they're all individual. They're not worlds apart from each other. We don't have anything kind of too extreme and abstract and odd in this tasting pack. They're just delicious Scotch whiskies. The type of which that Robert Burns himself, I'm sure, would approve on. And in addition to the tasting, we're going to get Tom's going to make a cocktail at some point. We don't know when. Probably we'll try and get to do that shortly before he passes out. And we
better move fast.
Yeah, better move quick. And we might have a little bit of poetry as well at some point. But we'll see how we get along. We'll see how the gears get oiled over the next sort of half an hour, 45 minutes before we commit to that entirely. So to join us on this journey, we've invited back a guest who appeared on a Whisky Me live tasting a couple of months ago, who is eloquent and erudite and, above all else, knowledgeable and wise. And sadly, it turns out, somewhat infected with COVID. But don't let that, he's not going to let that affect him tonight because it's Burns Night and it's whiskey on offer. We're going to invite back Hugh Barron from James Eadie. Hey, Hugh.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Evening. Good, thannk
Thank you for the very generous introduction. All very untrue, bar the COVID.
We're going to cure you tonight, don't worry.
Yeah, well, the three orange pouches are in front of me, so hopefully they will.
Absolutely.
They'll sort of stiffen me back up. But thanks for inviting me back, and it's great to be back on Whisky Me with you guys.
No, pleasure. This is going to be like one of those kind of American evangelical megachurch things where instead of sort of the power of the Lord Christ, it's going to be the power of the orange pouch.
Well, I guess it's spirit in a different way.
Well, I think
exactly.
I did read something on Pinterest that if you blend all 3 pouches together, it creates somewhat of a cure for COVID-19. Maybe I've made that up, but I remember something. I remember seeing something somewhere. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's a good start. I've got the Glenlossie in my glass, and I've just had a sip of it, and it's a great start.
Right. Well, I suggest we all do that. We should all pour out some Glenlossie. And I think, as I say before, if there are any questions or comments, We can see them. We can see what you're saying and thinking. So by all means, type that out and we will attempt to address them. So Glenlossie is actually the distillery that we just featured in this last month on Whisky Me. It was the whiskey that all of our subscribers just received in partnership with Carn. And it's gone down an absolute treat. Like, it's been extremely popular. And I remember when we first took samples of it about 9 months ago, it was amongst a sample from a bunch of other distilleries. And I had to say, at the time, I'd had Glenlossie before, but only once or twice. And it's really not a distillery that you see much of. It's one of these kind of hidden workhorses of the Scotch whisky industry. It turns out about 2.5 million litres of alcohol a year. And like, just sort of, if you're not familiar with kind of production figures of Scotch whisky, that puts it firmly in the kind of like, you know, medium to large size distillery. Not as big as some of the big ones, but if it sounds like a lot, it's because it is a lot. That's why. But everything goes into blends. It's owned by Diageo, and 99.9999% of everything that's made there ends up in Johnny Walker or J&B, or perhaps in some other blend bottled by someone else because they sell a load of stock to them. So it's really unusual to see it as single malt. And even amongst independent bottlers like Carn, like James Eadie, even then, you just don't see it that often. It's kind of uncommon. So we were excited when we got the sample and we tasted it and we were like, this is a nice dram. And it's from a distillery that no one really knows about or has heard of.
It's one of the for me at least, one of the best parts of what we do is the ability to get hold of these different liquids from all over the place, and actually, you know, whether we feature them or don't feature them for whatever reason it might be, you get to sample some really interesting bits, and you know, stuff that might not necessarily be, you know, wanting to be released by the brand that we're working with, but nonetheless perfect in terms of flavour profile for what we're trying to do. And it's quite interesting actually, these three especially, like Tristan said at the start, they're not enormously different, but they are very different in certain respects. But they're also, you know, really admired by our members from the feedback that we've had. And it makes you think about the style of whiskey that it is, in terms of obviously being fantastic for blends, being a great single malt whiskey to, I guess, add balance or a certain flavour profile to a blended whiskey. But it's also really accessible and light and delicate, and you know, has really defined nuances, but it's so easy to drink. And I think these are the things about all three of these drams. The one thing that runs through all of them is that actually they're just really, really great, accessible single malt whiskies that I think would be fantastic for anyone who's either on their journey or wanting to get into whiskey, single malt whiskey. I think they all fit the bill really nicely. So yeah, that's all I'd add on that.
Hugh, you've not had this one before, I don't think, have you?
Well, I haven't tried this one, but we've bottled quite a lot of
Glenlossie, yeah,
in the past. And what I love about Glenlossie is everything you just said there. It's a classic blending malt that no one really sees. It's in the flora and fauna. But the fascinating thing is, the reason why it's a prime example of everyone thinks single malt distilleries are made to make single malts, whilst actually they're ingredients for blends, bar the new distilleries who just bottle them. And Glenlossie shares a courtyard with Mannockmore, which was built in the 1970s. And rumour has it, when whiskey wasn't flowing as much as it is today, the workforce would work 1 year in Glenlossie, making the Glenlossie spirits, and they'll turn off the taps, and then the next year they'll walk across the courtyard and then work at Mannockmore, which creates a different type of flavour. So it's all making this different flavours for the blends, and it just shows it's a proper blending malt. And what we love about Glenlossie at James Eadie as well, it's the production method of having that purifying arm just gives it something a bit special, similar to Strathmore. You get a bit of an oiliness to it. It's a lovely grassy Speyside in that sense.
Yeah, and
this is a brilliant example of it. It has to be said. What I love, you get that sort of passion fruit at the end. You get sort of a lovely fruity note at the end from a very easy drinking dram. So it's a brilliant distillery, and it's, as you said, for anyone who's moving moving along in their whiskey journey. It's one of those hidden malts that really should be seen more. But luckily, it's used for blenders and bottlers like ourselves.
Also, I think it's also a really nice example of a whiskey, only 5 years old, that shows that you can create a real depth of character even at a relatively young age, in terms of balancing that sort of cask character and distillery character. It doesn't necessarily mean that older's better, right? You can have these amazing flavors within a whiskey of that sort of age range.
And is it only refill bourbon? Is it only ex bourbon?
Yeah.
I mean, that just shows you how well it's made at 5 years old. Just ex bourbon, so there's not much wood influence. I think
it's remarkable. It's not really wanting for anything, is it? You don't taste it and go, "Oh, that's unresolved or too young" or whatever. It's a complete package. Sure, it's not woody and all the kind of stuff that comes with that, but that's great because it has so much of that distillery character still.
Yeah. Just so clean, just really, really well made.
I mean, there are a fair few whiskies, to be fair, that we do, fortunately get to try that are still good, but do sometimes feel a little bit although they're lacking something, be it either they're, like you say, a little bit too woody, they've aged a bit too quick, or it's a bit forced, or the distillery character is a bit too heavy, or for whatever reason just don't quite feel like they're ready at that sort of age. Whereas that, for me, I drink that all day. It just feels quite balanced as a whiskey in itself, which is
just got a bit of everything, doesn't it? It's got that pepper at the end. It's just a great example of a well-made young whiskey.
Yeah, for me, I get and I'm going to put up some tasting notes from some of the viewers. I get a kind of orange soda thing that I just can't remove that. It's like cracking a can of Fanta for me. And then there's certainly some spice there, ginger, pepper, and then just a nice kind of candied sweetness to it as well. When we did the tasting card for it, I think it was orange soda, candy floss, and ginger we put on it, which of course doesn't tell the full story, but for me it felt kind of about right. And it was nice because it's sort of all of those things are sort of childhood sweet shop, nostalgic sort of things. And I think most of the time when we're looking for something delicious, all we're really looking for is something that reminds us of when we were kids,
Yeah. Just an alcohol form.
Exactly. With the added addition of alcohol, yeah. It's some more
that's brilliant. And I think with that youngness, that sort of the alcohol, not burns the wrong word, but that just gives it a bit more character.
Yeah.
It gives it a bit more freshness, which is really, really
I mean, let's also, 47.5%, it's not, it's not cask strength, but it's quite a high ABV for quite a young whiskey. I have to say, I think they've done a fantastic job of balancing that. Because, like I said, for me personally, and I haven't actually added any water to this just because I forgot to pour any for myself. But I see these as actually ways, because everything that we do at Whisky Me tries to go down the route of introducing people to single malt whiskey and world whiskey. Right? It's about can you be the gateway to that category of spirits? And I think something like this, as a single malt, 47.5%. I think does a really good job of that. And like I say, it's not alone in the three that we're going to taste, but I think it does a fantastic job in that respect. But
it's also a great introduction to what independent bottlers do to introduce these sort of malts. I mentioned last month is sort of the area of independent bottlers. When a distillery becomes popular through independent bottling, then the big guys tend to notice. So it's a very good platform to sort of show independent bottling as part of a whiskey journey, and then these lesser known distilleries. So
the danger there, of course, is that the distillery becomes a victim of its own success in the independent bottling market, and then the distillery decides to, and this of course has happened on a few occasions, launch a distillery-owned bottling at sort of twice the price and about 2/3 of the quality of what the independent bottlings are putting out, but with some bells and whistles, and then we all kind of have to get nostalgic about the good old days.
And then we don't get offered them anymore.
Exactly.
But I mean that has happened. But I guess that's part of the game in that sense.
Yeah, just on that, Hugh, just because obviously we've got three independently bottled whiskies. Just give us a bit of background on what that entails in terms of, obviously working for James Eadie. What does that look like as far as
It's all gang warfare. We all hate each other and we fight each other.
What do you do and how does it work and what's the process like?
Well, I think each independent bottler has their own way of doing things. I mean, I can't speak too much for Carn, but they've been around for a few years, so I don't know their process. But you know, it's all about timing. I mean, the fundamental thing about independent bottling, you're not in control of making the product, so it's all about the maturation and the timing of things. So it's on James Eadie point of view, it's just making sure when the whiskey's ready, we put it into bottle, whether that's in our small batch, single cask, or cask finish range. We also link everything back to our ledgers. But yeah, with independent bottling, there's the less romantic way is, you know, there's we don't nose every cask and hand choose them. It's on a spreadsheet, and then you've got to go through them yourselves and then make sure they're ready. But it's the most important thing for an independent bottler is just making sure it's ready. And what Carn have done with this 5-year-old Glenlossie, they've obviously tried it, and they've gone, and that could go into the bottle now as a great example of a 5-year-old. So every cask is different, so you do need to keep your eye on it. But yeah, I think they've timed this. They've given a great example of a young whiskey, showing that whiskey isn't about the age; it's just when it's ready. And this is a wonderful example of it.
Well, you'll do vattings of casks from the same distillery for a bottling, let's say, in a variety of quantities, depending on what's available and the sort of balance and flavors and all that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, I don't know how many bottles were this Glenlossie is, but for us, our biggest batch is our small batch, which is where we take 3 casks from one distillery. So that's the Ben Rinnes that we're having at the end. It's part of our small batch. Then there's a single cask range, which is you taste it and it's really, really nice, and you put it into a bottle. And then for us, we have our cask finish range, which is where that's all about distillery character and then balancing the cask influence of the 5 casks James Eadie used to use. So that's our way of doing things. And Carn, I know that they do some finishings, but because they've been around longer, they have much bigger warehouses with lots of hidden gems in there. So they can go into sort of slightly older whiskies, which we're beginning to get into. But yeah, that's it. You either vat it from a single malt distillery. We have our blend as well. So Carn also have the Old Perth, which is their blend. So they obviously blend with that, and then they'll do their single cask and other ranges as well. But yeah, but independent bottler and blender basically go hand in hand. It's basically what
makes sense.
And Kilmarnock.
It's probably the same objective either way, right? Just to get great liquid in front of people. And
we say only as good as your last release. So you just got to make sure everything is ready, and then
that's it. Brilliant, good stuff. Good.
Right, cool, interesting stuff. So we're going to move on to just one more tasting note from that one, which ginger. Blind or 5-year-olds. Oh, actually, not. I say one more. I haven't put this one up yet either. There you go. I think this hits the nail on the head. And I don't know whether I've been putting words in mouths, but grassy up front, icing sugar, ginger, wood spice, marshmallows, orange and lemon. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're all delicious things, aren't they? They're all great things.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Next one.
Marshmallow, definitely get.
Sorry, mate. What did you say?
The marshmallow bit, I definitely get like the background, like the sort of on the nose.
Yeah, there's a sort of caramelized sugar candy thing going on, marshmallow, candy floss, whatever. Yeah, it's definitely there for me anyway, and for obviously for some others. Okay, so next we're going to do Tinic, which is another Carn. It's another Carn bottling, and it's another Diageo distillery as well. There's certainly a theme so far. In fact, all the distilleries are Diageo tonight.
Indeed, yeah. the big blending house, basically.
Yeah.
Unsurprising when you own about a third of the industry.
Exactly, yeah, that's the thing. That's the excuse. So, Tinic, I mean, this is another distillery that has certain characteristics to it that really, I think, you just don't get anywhere else. It's one of the oldest distilleries in Scotland. I think it's the oldest licensed distillery in Scotland, 1817 or somewhere around that mark. There are distilleries before. Yeah, oldest legal, exactly. Yeah. It's funny. It's like a race to the bottom of the pit with oldest, because it's like, well, we're the oldest legal. Yeah, but we were doing it illegally.
Yeah. TNN were doing illegally, and then Linkwood, they opened at the same time, but Linkwood actually waited until 1821. So TNN are the bad boys, basically. They didn't care.
Yeah.
Right, just notice my dog in the background. You have to excuse her. Just crossed into the shop.
So, and one of the things about Tunic, so when we did Tunic and Whisky Me about 6 months ago, interestingly, because we did 2 subscriptions, we did the Scotch single malt whiskey, of which Tunic was that month, and then we do the World Whiskey. And World Whiskey that month was Mars Maltage Cosmo, Japanese whiskey. And it was not by design, it was purely by coincidence that these 2 whiskies were running together. And you might be wondering, well, why is there a coincidence there? One is a Japanese whiskey and one is a Scotch. But for many people, Tunic has a certain Japanese sensibility to it. It has a grassiness to it that comes across often as kind of green tea. And so when we were writing all the literature this month, I think it was September or October, we were like, oh, well, everything's kind of Japanesey. And it really does have this sort of herbal green tea. It can come across mentholy. It can be more like grassy. It can be a sort of nutty, right sort of green nut kind of characteristic. But anyway, the reason for it is, well, there's 2 kind of cited reasons. One is a fairly long fermentation, and the other is this strange mash filter situation that they have, which produces a kind of quite clear wort, as in the unfermented malt liquor before fermentation. And when you can sort of compile that all together with the fermentation and then presumably the stills and the way they cut it as well, you end up with this spirit that has this sort of green tea elegance to it. And if you have 3 glasses in front of you rather than 1, which is what I have made the mistake of doing tonight, it's great to kind of go back and forward between Glenlossie, Tunic, and then obviously later the Benrinnes, and try them. And you will start to notice things about Glenlossie that you hadn't picked up originally. And when you go to Tunic, you will start to notice things about that. And I think especially as I've just done, you'll notice this pronounced sort of herbal green tea note on it, which is just wonderful in my opinion.
Reminds me a little bit of the I don't think you get them here, but the matcha tea Kit Kats that you can get in like Hong Kong and Shanghai and parts of Asia. That this sort of sweet milk chocolate malty matcha, which I absolutely love. My wife hates them, but I think they're fantastic, and the flavors are just really really good. And like I said, the grassy note as well, which differentiates it quite a lot from the Glenlossie in a certain respect. Similar sort of styles, but very different at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite distilleries. I mean, it's massive. I think it produces about 10 million liters a year. So it's just showing you don't need a small, quaint distillery to make very, very good whiskey. And I completely agree. I sort of call it very earthy. There's an earthiness to it. Which I absolutely love. It's just got this complexity to it.
It must be the biggest distillery in Scotland that doesn't have. I mean, it's got the flora and fauna bottling, but let's discount that. It must be the biggest distillery without its own bottling, right? Biggest malt distillery.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, Glenord's pretty big as well, but Glenord is part of the Singleton range. But,
But then you've got Singleton and Glenord, I would say, is more of a distillery bottling than flora and fauna.
I think it is, and it's got an amazing history. It was, as you said, built in 1817 by the blind captain, who was a Napoleonic War hero, and he sort of did it because he came back from Waterloo and he lost his eyesight, and it was a time that sort of the Highland farmers were being kicked off the land by the crown, and he sort of got them all in to work on his distillery and work on his farm. So it was sort of a rebellion. So imagine this blind captain walking around this illegal distillery, which is amazing. But it's one of the, again, we powerhouses, one of those workhorse distilleries that produce a lot of great liquid. And we're very fortunate to work with it. But this is a pure example of what a Tunic is in terms of using just bourbon casks. It's fantastic, and I've made the same steak and I've only got one glass, so
yeah.
I've left half a pouch. I didn't finish the whole pouch. I've got half a pouch left to go back to it, but it's
Yeah,
and again,
that's what I'm doing as well. I'm kind of having to like speed date back through them, you know, because there's no single glass. It's just like down. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. No, I've got all three, and I can assure you that you're absolutely right in everything that you've said. Like huge difference, and fantastic. It'd be interesting to see actually because some of the, like you say, some of these distilleries and the liquids that are coming out of them, I think are quite on the money in terms of what people are looking for single malt at the moment, with a sort of, you know, I guess a newer sort of demographic coming through and trying to get into single malt whiskey and the styles that they represent. It'd be interesting to see over the next 4 or 5 years whether or not they start to bring out their own bottling, you know, aside of the flora and faunas and the bits that have come out, whether they'll actually look at that and go, well, hold on a minute, we've got really nice, relatively young but fantastic whiskey here. Maybe we should release more single malts directly from the distillery. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is for them is the balance, because they are, you know, whiskey is blends. Basically, 90% of the volume is blend. So, you know, imagine trying to sell 10 million litres of tin and economic. Glenlivet makes 20 million.
Yeah,
I mean, Glenlivet and Glenfiddich, which are two biggest probably single brands. You know, not premium like Macallan, but yeah, I mean that's the thing. So you've got a balance between building up Diageo especially building up their sort of premium range, and then making sure there's enough liquid to supply Johnny Walker and grow it in that.
Yeah. It's probably not high up their schedule of priorities.
Well, also, like, I mean, this stuff's led by marketeers, right? And I mean, I don't know how many distillery-owned bottlings Diageo have in their fold now, but what is it, like probably 12, something like that, maybe 15, and that's enough, right? Because at the end of the day, each of these bottles needs to capture a certain market, and of course, there's different demographics they're marketing to in different regions. But at the end of the day, like there's just not enough space to be going right, or enough ways to sort of slice up a market to go right. Well, the Tearnick is going to go somewhere in between what we currently do with Singleton and, you know, Mortlach or whatever, and it's too hard. You know, you're just kind of slicing that pie too small. So I think they're probably pretty savvy with the possibility of saturating, and that's I think
maybe cannibalizing their own sales.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I guess that's why they made. Well, this is only speaking as Diageo's. Diageo's market is they made the classical malts for that very reason. They had one from each region, Glenkinchie to Cragganmore and everything. And just now, because of the sheer demand, they've introduced Klein Leach is now one of their big brands in Mortlach. So I guess, you know, if it really picks up steam, then they'll go with it. But I think that they're concentrating.
No, you guys, I'm sure are right. It's probably not that high up. Which is, you know, the flip side of that is an amazing opportunity for independent bottlers and people to get hold of fantastic liquid and do some cool stuff with it, right?
Exactly, and that's also something that we need to thank the big companies for, because they're you know, we're part of that sort of balancing act of coming in and buying cars. They don't need to sell it to us. It's just one of those trying to explain independent bottling to people who don't understand whiskey. It's like, why do companies help you? Because we don't make the whiskey, you know. So it's just so it's great that we can show this, and it's great that the big companies support everything that we do as independent bottlers. So it's just very nice balancing act. Whilst if you look at Japanese whiskey and their shortage of supplies, because they don't have the buffers of the blenders and the bottlers or the independent bottlers who can buy that surplus stock for the accountants to be happy with. They just have to keep making it. So
that's it. Yeah, exactly. Cool, good stuff. I'm just thinking, shall we take a quick break for poetry before we move on to the next dram?
As long as I'm not reading it. I'm not putting on a Scottish accent and anything like that.
I've seen him do that before, by the way. I think you've done a Burns poem in a Scottish accent before. I'm pretty sure. Maybe.
Well, last year when I did this, I was accused of sounding Irish, which
you are.
Well, I am Irish, so it's no great wonder that happened. But the thing is, I was rehearsing this very briefly over dinner with my wife, and she was like, "You can't do the Scottish accent; it's going to offend people." And I was like, "What, offend people as in like for cultural appropriation reasons, or for like it's that bad it's actually offensive?"
Yeah.
And she thought it was that bad it was actually offensive. But the thing about Robert Burns is you can't really read it in English.
No.
You have to read it at least with some sort of Scottish kind of dialect, right? Because of the way it's written in the first place.
Exactly. Well, I think that's why he's so celebrated. Well, there's obviously many reasons why he's celebrated, but that is part of it. He captures the Scottish language of his time.
Yeah.
So yeah, reading it in a posh English accent doesn't quite capture the.
I'm sure you've never encountered this problem before, Hugh.
My mum's side are Scottish, so
right.
I've got 19 cousins from the Scottish side. So yeah, I get embarrassed. I think I have a good Scottish accent, and I do in front of a Scot, and I basically call them. Yeah, as you say, it's very offensive apparently. So, I don't really want to live on the stream that can be played back to me in years to come.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on, we're just fooling about here. It's not like it's going to live eternally on the internet on some server somewhere. I mean, come on.
Whisky Me.
Let's hear it. I'm excited.
So I last year, I can't remember what I read last year. This year, I thought, well, the world is changing fast, and one of the hot topics of the last year has, of course, been AI and artificial intelligence. So I was like, well, why not get an AI to write a Robert Burns poem for us about Whisky Me? So this is not my own creation, but I will take credit, or indeed,
you should have said that at the end
for the delivery.
Well, Tristan made an amazing poem about Whisky Me.
Let's see how it goes first before you take credit.
Well, I'm not taking credit. Look, there's only. I can't take credit for the poem. I can only be in trouble for how badly I deliver it. So this is the idea of getting an AI to do it is really not that great. I'm only going to look bad after this, but we might all look at ChatGPT and go, "Wow, what a cool thing," or indeed, bad thing. So here we go.
Settling in.
Let's have a wait. Let's have a little dram before we do this. Minded to wet my whistle halfway through. It's not long, by the way, so don't worry. There's no time for a toilet break if you were thinking that's what we're going to do. In Whiskey's realm, where tales are spun, Whisky Me brings a dram each month, a different one. In pouches neat, the spirits rest, each chapter in a quest. A journey through the malt and peat, in every sip a new treat, exploring realms of taste so grand, the finest whiskey in the land. So here's to Whisky Me, our guide. In pouches small, great wonders hide. A toast to discovery, new and free. In each month's dram, a mystery.
Amazing. Cheers to that.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Pirate Burns, bang on the nose. I was an Irish pirate reading a bit of Robbie Burns.
There you go. At least I got the Celtic bit,
Slange, everyone.
Slange.
God. How long did it take ChatGPT to come up with that?
Like 3 seconds. I mean, actually, I did one prompt, and I was like, write me a Robbie Burns about Whisky Me, and it was very general. Like, it didn't really know what Whisky Me was. It was just kind of about whiskey, but Whisky Me in there. And then I did another prompt, and I was like, look, this is what Whisky Me is. Now do it again. And it came up with that.
Enough for computer.
Listen, this is what Whisky Me is. I'm going to do it in a Scottish accent live. Just make it believable.
Yeah. Can you deep fake me to read it in a Scottish accent as well, please?
Yeah, can you recreate Robbie Burns as
I mean, in fairness, it is impressive, isn't it? It really is impressive. What can be, what it can do in.
Well, it was a very good
amount of time. It's quite.
It was pretty good. I mean, it's better than I could have written. That's for sure.
It certainly in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Or 30 seconds, incredible. But yeah, no, it's Brilliant.
I'm going to just leave this comment up for the rest of it now. Pirate Burns.
Pirate Burns, 100%. Irish Pirate
We should
Burns.
probably get that on a T-shirt.
Pirate Burns.
No, I was thinking the whole poem, but maybe just Pirate Burns.
To be honest, it sounds like a good.
Burns.
It could be a good rum brand, like Pirate Burns.
Pirate Burns. Yeah, quality.
Right. Okay. Third and final whiskey, and then we're going to go to cocktail corner with Tom. So, well, Hugh, do you want to introduce this one because it is your whiskey, the Ben?
Yes, well, it's our whiskey, isn't it?
Yes,
it's a James Eadie Whisky Me collaboration, and this is exclusive to Whisky Me, so you can only buy it through Whisky Me. This is our Ben Rinnes, 9 years old, which is part of our small batch range. Bottled at 46%, and our small batch range is our, should we say, entry level range to whiskey. So we're looking to give a great example of a distillery character, not identically to the two that we've just tried. So we only use either refill or first fill bourbon, and occasionally a recharred hogshead, to make sure there's not too much wood influence in that. Actually, it's a very good example of what the distillery offers, because most of the distilleries that we use in our small batch range tend to go into blends. So we've actually done a tin and a Glenmossy small batch in the past, and we release twice a year, so spring and autumn. So our next release is coming out in March. But this is an exclusive to Whisky Me, and you'll see if you got the fantastic tasting card that was sent through, you see those two pigs on the label, which are Tristan and Tom. No, they it's a nod. It's a nod back to James Eadie's pub. So James Eadie used to own 200 pubs. He was actually a brewer, and Trademark X are blenders in every single one of those pubs. But everything we do links back. So Tris and Tom chose. I think what was the pub called again? I don't have the bottle on me, but it was.
I'm not going to lie to you. I can't remember the name of the pub.
Oh, it's
Lovely Pigs, or.
Yeah, it was it's in Tamworth, wasn't it? That was the thing.
Tamworth, yeah.
Tamworth is a breed of pig, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there was sort of it was a pub named after its pigs. But here what you have is a prime example of Ben Rinnes, which again is a massive blending powerhouse. I think again about 4 to 5 million litres a year. Known for its meaty qualities. So more toward, probably a very good example of, you've had your grassy or your lighter Glenmossy, your earthier Teaninnick, and then you get this sort of meaty quality with this Ben Rinnes. So it's a great example of, just from these three malts, you could see why blenders want to work with them, because they all have their different qualities. And Norman Matheson, our master blender, loves Ben Rinnes. And James Eadie used to love Ben Rinnes as well, because it's in Trademark X, so he used to use a lot of it. But what you get here is sort of stewed fruits, and that meaty quality. I'm not saying it's steak or beef or pig or pork by that mean, but there's just got a bit about it where it has a bit of an oiliness to it as well, because of the worm tubs. So it's a savoury, complex dram, but also very, very drinkable. And Conan has got it. The Pretty Pigs in Tamworth.
Yeah, that's
one.
Yeah,
that's one.
Yeah, the meatiness.
And you guys, I mean, you were part of the process. There's no real magic behind our selection of the small batch. We get our car samples down. On this case, we probably got about 8 car samples down of Ben Rinnes. 3 of them were first fill, 5 of them were refill, and we just taste the casks, and then we pair them with each other. So one cask, the first fill bourbon tends to bring a bit more sweetness to it. So we look for a nice sweet cask there, and then 2 refills are looking for that sort of Ben Rinnes meaty, oily character. And Tom, you came around to the office and tried the car samples, didn't you? And we sort of said we're thinking of these 3.
I come by occasionally, don't I, Hugh?
Yeah. And then you kept on asking, can you resend some samples to me? It's like,
I enjoy an afternoon over there, and then we normally head down to an amazing pub. Well, one or 2 different pubs that are along the river there, which are
on route.
In fact, we're about due that in a few weeks, aren't we?
Yeah, it's January time. We tend to.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there we are.
It is, yeah, we need to do it again, but we're pairing. It's like a boozy jigsaw puzzle in that sense. We are pairing casks together. So it's our way of controlling our release. So again, as I mentioned before, no independent bottler, unless they have their own distillery, is in charge of making the whiskey. So we're all about the maturation and the timing and obviously the taste. And so this is us blending 3 casks together to make our sort of unique version of our small batch, which would be slightly different to if Carn Moor released a Benrinnes, because each cask is unique until you start working with about 50 or maybe even 20. That's where you get that distillery character starts coming through. So more of the main type was what we're working with as independent bottlers is the uniqueness of each cask. So make sure you taste it and when it's ready, because you can't obviously blend bad whiskey to make a good whiskey. 3 wrongs won't make a right. So it's just making sure that everything is good, and we only bottle when it's ready. And I have to say, this is, without sounding too much like a salesman, this is a very, very good Benrinnes that you guys have got as well. So it's a really, really good example. And I love, there's a bit of a lemon note, but it's got that, as you say, citrus, oak and leather is probably the perfect way of summing it up.
Also, I mean, this tasting note here, I think, picked on some things that I hadn't really noticed. Like blackcurrant is now, again,
wow.
Maybe, you know, there is a certain like real kind of dark fruit. It's not like rich dark fruit, but it's that lemoniness, but turning into dark fruit, you know.
There is a jamminess to it, like a blackcurrant jam.
Yeah.
Or something like a
but it's not kind of like sherried and sort of, you know, stewed down and heavy with it. You know, it's still quite bright, isn't it? You know?
It's funny, Hugh, the meatiness that you talk about. I didn't think about that at all until you mentioned it. But before we were talking about this particular dram, when I was nosing it alongside the other 2, it kept reminding me of bacon fries. You know, the crisps. Now it's not smoky. It's not smoky. It's not smoky at all. But then I thought, well, what is that? And when you talked about it, it reminded me then a bit of like pancetta, like that kind of. There is this sort of porky meatiness to it, this richness to it on the nose and on the palate. I think that runs through it.
It's very hard to explain. I mean, when I say meaty, everyone's like, "What do you mean by that?" So it's just I don't know. It's just got a bit of body behind it because it's citric. It is. The lemon is a very good note, and then you get the fruitiness, but it's just got that, as you said.
Yeah, I think sometimes like there are a few whiskies that get described as meaty. I mean, the Mortlach is the famous one for it, but I think actually it can be misleading to say meaty because people are like, "Oh, right, it's going to taste like beef or pork or something," and sometimes I think sometimes describing it as muscular is actually more like apt. It's not really that it tastes of meat; it's that it has a sort of strength or brawniness to it. You know,
it's a richness, isn't it?
Because so with our other range, our cask finish range, that's where we move it from a refill bourbon cask into one of the 5 wine casks that James Eadie used to mature his whiskies in. So Malaga, Madeira, Marsala, sherry and brandy. And when we first started, so our first 4 casks, we used Benrinnes, Blair Athol, Dal Ewan and All Thrusk for that very reason. Those meaty / muscular whiskies, because if they got blown away by the cask, then you wouldn't be able to put it into a Glenmossy or into a liquid or one of those lots ones as well.
Thrusk is another great one from Diageo, actually, that again, workhorse, but produces great whiskey as well. Yeah.
And my one from Diageo that I love is Inch Cow. I think Inch Cow.
Yeah.
Try and dig some out.
There's loads of them. So let me just put up a few more tasting notes on this one. We've had that one. Lots of citrus. So I would be interested to know from everyone that's watching what your favorite was. I mean, I would be hard pressed to pick one because I do feel like each of these has its own redeeming features and probably use case. And I actually, do you know, I really would struggle to pick them apart. I'd struggle to pick the one I dislike the most or like the most. They really are very close. So that's partly why I'm so intrigued to know if anyone has a strong opinion on one over another.
And don't let the fact that I'm here change it.
No, you. My favourite's definitely the Benrinnes, just because you're here.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as I log off, all the comments will be like,
I'm gonna make
I couldn't even finish my sample.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But the funny thing about it is, like I said, they're very different but very similar in a certain way in terms of the style of them, right? you know, like you talk about, none of them are super intense in terms of one specific flavour, let's say, so intense that they stand out to a point of it being so different.
Yeah.
They're all very different, but also very subtle.
Yeah.
And
I've got a blending glass here, so I've got some Tierninic and Glenlossie in there, and you put the Ben Rinnes, and then they'll probably all work together because they have that.
And then you've got no COVID. There you go.
No COVID, yeah. I'll be back on the street.
You've got Johnny Walker, green label.
I do have, basically. Maybe a bit of Colila and
you got Johnny Walker 7.
Well, I don't know if it's because you're here, Hugh, and because you got COVID, but everyone's voting Ben Rinnes.
I know. That's very, very kind of them.
It's a nice sympathy vote. I think it's very kind of you guys to do that for Hugh when he's not feeling so well.
Makes me feel well.
No, but the Ben Rinnes is cracking. It's great.
You guys chose it, so it's we offered you a few whiskies and
just one thing, Hugh, because obviously I'll make a drink in a minute, but on the Project X, tell us a bit about that as well, because that's
the Trademark X. Yeah, so that is the
crap with that, because that's the sort of big.
Yeah, that's why we're a company. So James Eadie's my boss's great grandfather, and he was originally from Blackford up in Scotland, and at the age of 14 he moved to Staffordshire to blend tea for his uncle and sell malt to the breweries. By the time he was 24, he was bored of selling malt to the breweries and wanted to make his own beer. So he built his own brewery on Cross Street, and Cross Street is why it's called Trademark X, because the X stands for cross. By the time he died, he had 200 pubs, and in 200 pubs serving his beer, and more importantly for us, had his Trademark X whiskey in there. So it's one of the earliest trademarks. It was trademarked in 1877. So it's one of the earliest trademarked whiskies. But sadly, being a brewer and not a blender, so he was not grown up. He was selling his whiskey alongside Johnny Walker from Kilmarnock and Arthur Bells. But because he was a brewer, Bass, who were the big brewery in Burton, bought out this company in 1933, and they stopped producing the whiskey in 1946. So it got lost to time until Rupert, James Eadie's great-great-grandson and my boss, has revived it using his ledgers. So everything we do at James Eadie goes back to his ledgers. And so we use the same 14 whiskies that were in the original recipe. There were 16, but we managed to get our hands on the 14 because 2 of them closed down at the beginning of the 20th century. And from there's some amazing whiskies in there. So Colila, Ben Rinnes, Talisker, Lagavulin. So we revived it back in 2017. And the most important part of the story is Norman Matheson, who's been in the whiskey industry since he's 17. He's now, I think, 72. So he knows a thing or two about making whiskey. And he said to Rupert, who was a corporate man at Diageo before he left, it's all about the whiskey. So even in your blend, don't dilute it down by using bad whiskey. Whiskey is a natural product that when it's ready, and then you can put it into a bottle. And that goes for our blend. So Norman noses all our casks to make sure that they're all great for the blend. And so in 2017, Rupert had the master blender and the recipe, but looking at the ledgers, having Lagavulin and Colila, he didn't know if it was really peaty or if it was lightly peated. And his uncle, who sort of sent him on the quest, phoned him up asking how it was all going. And he was like, well, I haven't tasted it, so if I'm going to revive it, I need to know what it tastes like because I want to do it properly. And his uncle said, well, I've got a case of it in my cellar. So 6 bottles of the 1946 blends was sent to Rupert. And if you go on our website, you'll see the nosing with Rupert, Norman Matheson and Leon, who is head of operations or brand director, and then Dave Broom and Tom Bruce Gardine, 2 whiskey writers, and they uncork it. And Rupert's face in the video is pasty white because he goes, I've done all this work, and if it's caught, then we're back to square one. And Norman knows it, goes, it smells delicious, and all the colour comes back to Rupert's face. He can't stop talking. He literally, the whole video, he goes, this is the best whiskey in the world. You're like, calm down, it's your family whiskey. But from that, we developed, I think I've got a bottle behind me, which I'll go and get. We developed Trademark X, so it's in its 6th year now, and we sort of release a batch every year using the same whiskey. So So that's the core, and then from there we do our single malts, which we release twice a year in spring and autumn. and they're split into small batch, which nods back to our past through the labels and the pubs. Single cask is the only thing that we don't touch the whiskey at all. And then the cask finish is not only did James Eadie tell us what was in the blend, he told us how he matured his whiskies. So we finish in Madeira, Masala, Malaga, sherry and brandy. So we go back into the history and then sort of bring it forward as well. So,
nice.
So that's James Eadie in a nutshell. I'll go and get the bottom of trademark X for you.
Cool. Yeah. And in the meantime, Tom, get yourself warmed up because
that is the trademark X. So that's the only whiskey we can consistently produce. So the others are all batch. So, for instance, the Ben Rennes at Whisky Me, there's only about I think there's about 700 bottles or so. Yeah. And when they're gone, they're gone. So
exactly. This is it. It's incredible to do that, and create such a small selection of bottles, and then that expression of that liquid, it's done. When it's gone, it's done, and that's it.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. So at the moment, we've just gone through our samples for the spring release, and we think it's nice, and then you get really nervous because we think it's nice, but we don't know how you guys are going to see it.
Well, you'll have to invite us down to let you know how nice it is. I think that's the only way to sort of put that argument to bed, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're only as good as your last release, so it's fantastic, and we would like to introduce some more consistent, because sometimes you've got to just go every 6 months. You're sort of reaching out, and you've got to resell those lines. But it's fantastic. It's not a bad job.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
right, Tom, you're going to make a cocktail for us.
Yeah. Well, speaking of blends. I'm going to use one of our blends for our cocktail tonight. I was thinking what whiskey to use, and I'm going to make, obviously, a Bobby Burns, which makes perfect sense given it's Burns night. And I started thinking about the cocktail itself, and it was a bit of a granddad now in the cocktail scene, reminding myself about the history of it and looking back. And I think it was first written about in around 1905, 1908, something like that. But it was first written about as a Bobby Burns, I believe, around about the time of the Savoy Cocktail Book in about 1930. This isn't a 1930s cocktail book, but it is from 1984 or 1983, which was the year after I was born. And so I looked in there and found not that bookmark, but this one here, which has in it the Bobby Burns cocktail, which it has a footnote to it that says one of the very best whiskey cocktails, a very fast mover on St. Andrew's Day. So back in, this is written in 1930, that would have been, one of the biggest cocktails around at the time. And it consists of equal parts Italian vermouth, which would normally mean sweet vermouth or Martini Rosso, Scotch whiskey. It doesn't really reference whether it's single malt or blend. In this case,
well, definitely would have been blend, of course, in the 1930s. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. We've got our own Whisky Me specific blend, which is the batch 2 peated blend that we've got. I think there's only about 8 bottles of this left, which is something that we released pre-Christmas, which I'm going to use. And a little bit of Benedictine, which I borrowed from my local Italian delicatessen because I didn't have a full bottle and I couldn't get any in Sainsbury's, basically. So I'm going to make this drink. I've got to go into my fridge and freezer, which is right here, and grab from there my mixing beaker and my coupe. And seeing as I'm making this for myself, I'm going to free pour, but we're going with equal parts blended Scotch. In this case, it's our own blended Scotch, but around 35 milliliters. Let's say
this is our peated winter malt, isn't it? It's batch 2 of our winter blended malt, and that's the peated one. Yeah, so this is gonna be a bit smoky.
Yeah. So we did two different blends just before Christmas. Very similar in terms of their DNA and what they're about that runs through the flavour itself. But one was peated and one unpeated. And this is the peated version. We're going to go with 35 milliliters of Martini Rosso or sweet vermouth, and we're going to go with just a dash of Benedictine, or 2 to 3 drops of Benedictine in there as well. And I'm going to give this a stir. So 15 seconds, 20 seconds, just to chill this down. And again, along with the, you got the Bobby Burns, the Rob Roy, and only a small selection of other cocktails made with Scotch whisky, particularly. This is one of the most famous.
And so by stirring it, you're not wanting to dilute the ice.
I'm going to strain this into my chilled coupe. Well, you want a hint of dilution. You want a little bit of dilution, but not too much. You want to, you want to give it a hint of dilution. You want to bring the ABV down slightly, but most importantly, you want to chill it, and you want it to be as cold as possible, effectively, to drink. Now,
thing about
so there we have the Bobby Burns. Now, I'll be honest with you, it looks as though my camera is messing up somewhat here, and I don't know whether that is the case for everybody.
Very artistic.
Yeah, it's kind of like we put a Photoshop kind of filter on you.
Say again, sorry, Tristan.
Yeah, your camera is messing up. Yeah, it is artistic.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'll be honest, that was throwing me for a second. So I felt like I was in a Van Gogh painting or something. So apologies if that was a little bit sketchy. But I couldn't
literally looks sketchy. Yeah,
something had gone wrong there. But anyway, that is the Bobby Burns. It's equal part blend of Scotch whisky, sweet vermouth, a little bit of Benedictine, slid down, straight up with normally with a twist of lemon, but.
All right. Fantastic. Well, look, I think Tom's internet feed is correlating with his blood alcohol level, and we should perhaps start to consider wrapping this up. But
very jealous of that cocktail.
I know. I wish I had one as well. Just got room temperature whiskey here, for God's sake.
I'm the guy who always forgets to fill up the ice cube tray. Get told off.
I have an ice machine in my house now. So never go without. Yeah, it's a revelation. Honestly, it changes your life.
Yeah.
I kind of put it alongside running water and electricity. To be honest with you, is essential. Well, look, God, it's like what's that art? Is that the Aha music video? Take on Me. That's like Tom's gone like that. With sort of illustration.
We're not saying it's an improvement, Tom, but
yeah. Okay, cool. Well, look, let's wrap this up. Hugh, first of all, as our guest of honor, thank you so much for joining us. Your knowledge and enthusiasm, passion, always appreciated in spite of illness. And
thank you. I appreciate that.
That's giving me something to do today. I don't want to complain about being in bed all day because you can't really complain about that.
Well, I mean, it's remarkable. When I had COVID last, I definitely wouldn't have done a whiskey tasting. Well, I might have done, but only in private. So, well done. Tom, if you can hear us, thank you for the cocktail and for your knowledge as well and insight into all this stuff. And everyone who joined. Wow, we've had a lot of comments tonight. We really do appreciate it. Loads of tasting notes and interesting thoughts on the whiskies. Ben Rinnes, clearly the kind of top spot. I do think it's because of Hugh.
That's a bit of peer pressure, I'm sure.
but I've got 3 great whiskies. Really enjoyed it, and I guess also to me for the poetry. What can I say?
To
ChatGPT
really
pulled it out of the bag. Yeah,
to the future.
AI indeed, and when I say I mean in the Scottish or Celtic tradition of I. Yes. So thanks again. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next year, maybe, or indeed next month if you're a Whisky Me member. Goodbye.